Hey everyone and welcome back. In today's video we'll be discussing about the basics of Docker, the advantages that the Docker offers, which really makes it as one of the great technologies available, and also a small demo before we conclude the video. So let's go ahead and understand more about it. Now, before we go ahead and understand the advantages that the Docker offers, let's look into a typical installation of software workflow. I'm sure that most of you might have already experienced this with your workstation. Now, let's say that we have a Windows operating system and you want to install certain application or you want to install a certain game. Now, the first step is to download the installer. So installer would be a typical .exe file. Now, once you download the installer, you go ahead and double click on the exe file so that the installer starts to run. Now, during the middle of the installation, many of you might have already experienced that you get an error message during installation saying that certain files are missing or certain dependencies are missing, etc. So you start to troubleshoot the issue so that you understand the fix to solve this specific error message. Now, once you troubleshoot it and once you install a specific dependency, you rerun the installer and might be you get another error which might not be the same as the previous one. Now again, you go back to the same cycle of troubleshooting it and rerunning the installer. Now I still remember this type of workflow you typically see specifically when you used to install the GTA game. Now, it always used to say that there are certain DLLs which are missing, certain dependencies which are missing, and you had to go through this software workflow at least a time or two to make sure that you have all the dependencies and all the requirements to install the game. Now, this workflow that we were discussing over here, this is the end user workflow. Now, there is also a workflow related to the development. Now let's say that this is a programmer who works very hard at developing a software. So he has developed this specific software. Now, depending upon the way in which he has created the software, it might or it might not work out of the box in the operating system. So let's say that he has created a software through Visual Studio. So it might work directly in Windows, it will not work in Linux, it will not work in Mac. And this is a pain for the programmer because if he wants that software to work in Linux, if he wants to make it work in Mac, it is really a pain. He might use Java, but if let's say he does not really wants to use Java, out of the box, it really becomes difficult for the developer as well. So what he can do, he can create this software, he can put it in a Docker container. Now he can deploy the Docker container in Windows, he can deploy it in Linux, he can deploy it in Mac. And he can be 100% sure that the Docker container software that he has tested in his local environment will work perfectly in Windows, it will work perfectly in Linux, and it will work perfectly in Mac and all the operating system which the Docker supports. So this really becomes much more easier for the developer to push his software to wide variety of operating system, and also all the dependencies which are required by this specific software, because during the second slide that we were discussing that software installation typically fails due to dependency issues, etc. He can put all of these dependencies within the Docker container itself. So once he deploys the Docker container to any operating system, it will work out of the box and the end user does not really have to do anything other than running this specific Docker container. So with this, let's understand what Docker is in a definitive terms. So Docker is basically an open platform. Now, once we build a Docker container, we can run it anywhere. We can run it in Windows, we can run it in Linux, we can run it in Mac, whether it is a laptop, it is in a data center, or it is in a cloud. Now it follows build once, run anywhere approach. So that basically means that once the software developer has built his own Docker container, he can run it anywhere. He can run it in Windows, he can run it in Linux, he can run it in Mac as well in a perfectly working condition depending upon the test that he has performed while he has created the Docker container. So this is the theoretical perspective. Let me quickly give you a demo so that we have a good understanding about this. So for our demo purposes, we'll be taking the example of nginx. Now, nginx is a very popular web server in the market. Now, we'll consider nginx to be this software which has been written by an organization. Now, if you look into the technical specification of nginx under the supported distribution, it does support Amazon Linux. Then you have CentOS, Debian, FreeBSD. Then you have the Red Hat Linux, SUSE, Ubuntu, etc. But it does not really support Windows. And this is the reason why I have chosen this specific web server for our demo purpose. Now, what we need to ensure is that if we try to install this in Windows, it will not really work because you will not have an exe file out of the box. So what you need to do is you can put this entire nginx within a Docker container. And once you have done that, you can deploy that Docker container in Windows, Linux, as well as Mac. Now again, Mac is not supported here, but if it is under the Docker container, it will work irrespective of whether nginx is supported out of the box or not. Now, the first thing that we'll typically need to verify whether the nginx Docker container is available or not. So this is the Docker Hub website, and here you see there is a nginx container which is available, and this is the official image. So let me click over here, and if we go a bit down, you see this is the nginx official image, and basically here is the command to pull the nginx image. And if you go a bit down, you will see various commands which are available in which you can run the specific image. So generally there are two steps which are involved generally when you use Docker. The first step is basically this specific Docker container image. It would be in a specific website. Now Docker Hub is one such website. So you have to pull this image, or I would say you have to download this image within your operating system where you want to start the container from it. Now, for that, you have the command of docker pull nginx. Now, once the image is downloaded, you can go ahead and start the container from it. So let's look into how exactly this would work. Now, let me copy this up, and from my Windows CLI, I'll paste the docker pull nginx command. So this command will go ahead and download the nginx image from the Docker Hub repository. Now do remember that before this command works, you need to make sure that you have the Docker daemon installed within your operating system. Now Docker supports Windows, Linux, as well as Mac. And basically, if you see over here, I have the Docker daemon which is running, and this is the reason why my Docker command works perfectly. So let's quickly wait for a moment for our image to get downloaded. Alright, so our nginx image has been successfully downloaded. Now the next thing that you need to do is you have to start the container from that image. So for that, I'll write a simple command of docker run. I'll specify a port mapping, let's say 8080 to the 80 of the container. Let me specify the container image, which is nginx. So it has given us the long output over here, but if we quickly do a docker ps, then you should see that there is a nginx container which has started up. Now in order to verify, I am in my ignito mode, and I'll put 127.0.0.1:8080. And now you see it basically is showing me the index.html page of nginx. So that means my nginx is perfectly working in the Docker container, and I am able to access that within my Windows browser. So this is the great advantage of the Docker containers. You don't really need to worry whether it is supported or whether application is supported in Windows or not, or whether application is supported in Linux or not. As long as you can put it under the Docker container, you will be able to run it in Windows, Linux, as well as Mac, or in fact any operating system where the official Docker daemon is supported. So with this, I hope you understood at the high level overview on what Docker is all about. Now, one great thing, in fact, two advantages we just saw. One was nginx was not supported in Windows, but through the Docker container, it is perfectly working. And second is, we did not really have to worry about installation of nginx and taking care of all of the dependencies, etc. All we did was we pulled this specific Docker container of nginx, and that container itself had all the required dependency to run the nginx web server. And once we pulled it, we went ahead and started the Docker container, and that's about it. And this is the reason why Docker as a technology has become extremely popular. And typically, if you look into the roles of DevOps or SREs, having a good understanding of Docker is a mandatory thing which a lot of organizations are looking for. And even as a software developer, primarily because of such advantages that it offers, a lot of organizations are also mandating that the software developer should also have at least basic knowledge about the Docker containers. So this is the high level overview about the introduction to Dockers. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I look forward to see you in the next video.